Next up, Social Democrats. Deputy Holly Cairns.
I have three questions, two for Minister Creed and one for Minister Humphreys. Could they be answered in that order as well?
Terrific.
Yeah. Minister, we met here 3 weeks ago. I raised three issues: workers' rights, the vulnerability of our food supply chains, and the need for transformative change in the sector in advance of future crises similar to Covid-19. And I didn't get clear answers. So I'm back here again, unfortunately, discussing the same thing and asking almost exactly the same questions. I'm very new to politics. I grew up on a dairy farm in West Cork, and like many, it became unviable when milk quotas were lifted. Now we're operating, albeit at a loss, in beef production. In my lifetime, I've seen a total transformation of Irish agriculture and the consequences for farmers and our wider communities. I went on to study it, and the more I learnt and experienced, the more questions I had. Questions like, why is the agri-food sector constantly moving in an unsustainable direction that continues to erode farmers' and other workers' rights, that weakens our food security and that causes irreparable damage to the land? Who benefits? It doesn't take long to realise how our land is managed and who gains from it is the result of our political choices. So change can only come about where there is a political will to do so. This inspired me to engage in politics. Having made it to this chamber, with all that entails, I'm sure you can empathise with how frustrating it is to then realise how difficult it seems to be to get a straight answer in here. So I'm asking you, Minister, respectfully to please answer the questions this time. My first question, Minister Creed, is do you agree that the power of the beef processing sector needs to be tackled? And if so, what are you doing about it? The power of the beef lobby is often mentioned in this chamber. The cartel-like practices, the ever-decreasing prices for farmers and the disgraceful treatment of workers. Too often, discussion around clusters in meat processing plants have focused on where some workers are from, a divisive us and them narrative. But if there were an us versus them, the us is farmers, consumers, butchers and Irish and migrant workers, and the them is an industry dominated by a small number of players who reap most of the rewards. It's no coincidence that these clusters are in the mega-industrialised segment of the agri-food sector. The global industrialisation of farming has contributed to the creation of viruses and the spread of this pandemic. There are no clusters in small abattoirs, in butcher shops or on small farms, whereas intensive farming relies on big meat processing plants. I note that you've acknowledged the current problem in beef plants, but will you also acknowledge the bigger, more fundamental problems that have led to this one? To be clear, my second question is, can you acknowledge how unsustainable our current practices are, and what do you plan to do about it? Ensuring a food system is secure and safe is more than ensuring stock is on shelves. It's about reducing our total reliance on imports and shortening supply chains. The sector should prioritise local economies, connecting producers and consumers and protecting farmers and workers. Only then can Irish people be confident that we have an ethical, safe food system. Minister Humphreys, it's disappointing that it's taken this crisis, the health of workers, for the conditions in meat processing factories to be seriously looked at. The cluster of Covid-19 in meat plants have occurred despite warnings from workers and representative organisations. These clusters were avoidable, as they were in direct provision centres, if warnings had been listened to. At the best of times in this sector, workers get low wages for physically demanding work and no proper sick pay. And now today, when you and I are recommended to only spend 2 hours socially distanced in this large room, staff in meat plants certainly are not. They are working nearly on top of each other in dangerous conditions for long shifts. In addition, there are a disproportionate amount of migrants working in this industry, with non-EU workers' residency depending on their job. They have limited access to social welfare and about 10% have very little or no English, and they're not being heard. These workers are incredibly vulnerable, and we are obliged to ask if this vulnerability contributed to the clusters of Covid-19. Why were calls for greater regulation and restriction ignored? Where were health inspectors and resources available in plain English and other languages? The state and big business might be happy for this situation to continue, but I and many of my constituents are not. We want to know that our food is produced in a safe, ethical and fair way. Workers deserve more protection, farmers deserve to be paid properly, and the consumer deserves greater transparency. Minister Humphreys, do you agree with me that workers' rights should be protected in meat processing plants, and if so, what are you doing about it? Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Minister Creed. 3 questions.
I think Deputy Cairns indicated she wanted to ask me 2 questions, but I think I only got 2. Yeah, well, one was about the power of the beef sector, and the other one was about sustainability. I'm not sure what the third one was.
Yeah, the third one is for Minister Humphreys. So two
sorry,
for
I
you,
have 2.
Sorry, and one for Minister Humphreys.
I have 2. Well, I'll be very brief in replying to them. On the power of the beef sector, we've taken specific actions to try and redress the balance. You might be aware that we have been advocating and have successfully established a number of producer organisations, for example, because the constant refrain has been in respect to the beef sector, when an individual farmer rocks up outside of a meat plant, he's a price taker. And the argument that we have been trying to sustain and financially support beef farmers in establishing producer organisations so that they can collectively work together and thereby secure a better price by being able to have a critical mass in the marketplace. And that's a relatively new phenomenon. It's not a panacea, but they are part of the architecture in most other European countries and do deliver a greater balance to farmers in an equation that has probably been unfairly tilted against them.
Weren't working due to a lack of profit in them. So I'm wondering what you're doing to actually tackle it. You alluded to that not working.
That's the historical record. I can't force people to get involved in a cooperative, but the historical record is there was cooperative involvement in the meat industry, and they exited it.
What are you doing to tackle?
Well, I'm just giving you. If you let me reply, I'm giving you the things that we are doing to try and redress, to give farmers more power along the supply chain. There is what's called a UTP directive, an Unfair Trading Practices Directive, which we're transposing from a European directive into national law. In the context of that transposition, we went out to public consultation, and one of the issues which we have attached to the implementation of the directive is a regulator for the sector, which would look at the dominance of the meat industry and see how, if possible, that dominance can be curtailed to the benefit of both the consumer and the primary producer. So there are 2 practical steps in terms of restoring some balance along the supply chain. The other, well, we concluded a public consultation. We have a fixed period of time within which we transpose the directive into national law. We were doing it as quickly as possible. The directive was only completed in the end of 2019, so we're losing no time at it. The producer organisations are already up and running, and I would encourage farmers to join one if they haven't already done so. On the issue of sustainability, I mean, that is core to everything that the Department of Agriculture is about, notwithstanding some of the commentary that would suggest that we are blindly indifferent. Because we are so export orientated, we are acutely conscious of the legal framework within which we operate, the fact that if we don't meet specific targets, there are significant financial penalties. We're aware of the obligation because, for future generations to hand on the planet in the most sustainable way possible. But we are also acutely conscious that in the marketplace where we are exporting, the premium prices are available if you can move further and further up the value chain. And that's why we have been, say, for example, working with Bord Bia through Origin Green to ensure that the sustainability programme that we are pursuing is not just a green sticker on an Irish product, but it is audited and verifiable. And that's not, often recognised, that these Bord Bia programmes are verifiable and audited and stand up to scrutiny. And that's part of the sustainability. We are global leaders, for example, in terms of the sustainability of our dairy industry. Ireland and New Zealand, the most competitive in terms of carbon efficiency for dairy. We are 5th in Europe in terms of beef. We can do an awful lot more in that space, and that's the journey we're on because of the climate action plan that government have published, the Tagus roadmap and the implementation of that.
Thank you, Deputy. And can I just say that the food sector is, as Minister Creed has said, probably the most regulated sector that we have. We have, of course, inspections from the HSA and from the WRC. And can I also say that the workers that work in the meat sector enjoy the benefits of all employment rights. So it doesn't matter where they come from. They have access to all the supports that Irish workers enjoy, and if for some reason some of them have to take off, they get the full illness benefits, the exact same rights as all Irish workers have. Yes, all of them. They have all of those rights. And can I just? Yeah, but no. Sorry, Deputy. Sorry.
If you're a non-EU migrant worker, your residency often depends on your job, so it's not the same situation for everybody.
Yeah, well, they are the non-EU migrant worker has rights under the permit that come in here. We're very careful that they get paid more than the minimum wage. For certain sectors, they get paid considerably more than that.
Thanks, Minister.
In particular, meat boners get 27,000 per annum, and the WRC is the inspectorate that looks and checks about the conditions of employers. So they are being taken care of.
Solidarity People Before Profit with two speakers. Deputy Breed Smith.